Hey everyone, it's Scott Rustrolls here for the June 22nd edition of the Listen and Learn podcast. Quick reminder up top, you can subscribe to us either on YouTube or on iTunes, whatever is more convenient to you, or you can subscribe to both of them if you are so inclined. Today we're going to focus on three stories. The first one, and the largest one really, is the Senate healthcare bill, which was finally unveiled today, aiming for a vote next week. I think it's safe to say the law does some good things, some bad things, some things I like better than the House bill, some things that I think are worse than the House bill. But the bill is certainly not perfect. There is some opposition. We'll see if they can make the improvements that are needed to get to 50 votes. So let's talk about some things that are in it. Similar to the House bill, there'll be a one-year ban on any funding to Planned Parenthood. They also did include, like the House, that no federal subsidies can be used for insurance plans that cover abortion, with exceptions for life of the mother, of course. But the Senate parliamentarian may strip that out, given some of the arcane rules around what you can pass with 51 votes in the Senate. But it's something that social conservatives wanted a lot, and it's good for the Republicans to at least try and push it through, and we'll see whether or not the parliamentarian allows it. Beyond that, it's important to note the law takes a couple years to phase in, right? You can't change the insurance market Jan 1, 2018. It's not enough time for all the insurance companies and states to adapt to the new rules. So there's a stabilization fund in there, $15 billion next year, $15 billion the year after that. And they will also have the cost sharing with the insurance companies for lower income people during the phase-in. Now, some conservatives are going to say this is not right. We shouldn't be helping the insurance companies. But this is a perfect example where the Republicans are in a rock and a hard place here. You can't change the law immediately starting next year. That's simply not possible. So yes, it's unseemly to make these payments, but Republicans, there's really no choice. So social conservatives, fiscal conservatives need to just accept the fact that if no matter what happens with Obamacare, these payments just have to be made unless you want people in a really bad situation start January 1, which is in no one's interest. So it's just kind of a necessity that these payments get made. Unsurprisingly, the employer mandate is removed, which is a good thing. So now if you get past 50 employees, you don't have to provide insurance, which I think should help small business grow. It repeals all the taxes in a staggered fashion. Looks like it'll do that in a bit slower fashion than the House bill because it's more generous in other areas. My guess is when the CBO scores it probably on Monday, they'll say there's about $650 billion in tax cuts over a decade, which is a lot to like. Medicaid expansion. They're rolling that back starting in 2021, whereas the House bill did it in 2020, and it'll take 3 years to roll it back. And then, however, thereafter, it's only going to grow the funding to the states at the rate of inflation, whereas the House did it at inflation plus 1%. To me, that's a good thing. However, the one risk you have is by delaying it into 2021 and then 2025 is you get a Democratic president who tries to stop those cuts in fundings. But that would require Republicans switching their view on Medicaid because this new phase-in would become current law. I think on that, this is a good change to Medicaid versus what the House does. Similarly to the House, states can take Medicaid as a per capita payment, or instead they can take a block grant and then try and innovate and change the Medicaid program to be more effective for its citizens. I think that's great. Give states as much opportunity as possible. And plus, states will be able to impose work requirements on able-bodied adults, similar to the Clinton welfare reform in the 1990s, which was so successful. And that, again, is similar to the House bill. States, like in the House bill, can continue to opt out of essential health benefits that will allow, so for instance, if I lived in a state that removes some of these, I would not have to buy maternity coverage in my insurance like I currently do. However, unlike the House bill, it does not look like they'll be able to touch the pre-existing conditions. So net, though, that still gives states more flexibility, even though they won't be able to have the same flexibility with pre-existing conditions and invisible risk pools that I think they would have been allowed to in the House. They are going to allow mildly skimpier plans overall to try and lower premiums. However, not pure catastrophic plans. That's something Ted Cruz was pushing for. I think he was right to. For many lower income and particularly younger Americans, bare bones, low premium catastrophic plans make a lot of sense. Leadership apparently doesn't want to do that because they don't think it could get through the Senate parliamentarian. But I suggest give it a try. It's the right policy. You might as well try and push that and see if there's some way to get it in and bring Ted Cruz on board. And then lastly, the tax credits, whereas ACA is really driven by income, and the AHCA was driven primarily by age. The Senate bill kind of finds a happy medium between the two. So a 21-year-old who saw an average premium, according to the CBO, of $1,700 in the ACA would see that same one in the House bill, but would only see a $1,100 premium in the Senate bill, assuming they make $26,000. Again, for a 40-year-old in the ACA, it'd be about $1.7 thousand. They would go up to $2.1 thousand in the House bill, stay at $1.7 thousand in the Senate bill. And a 64-year-old making $26,000 would be $1.7 thousand in the ACA, supposedly $14,000 in the AHCA, but only $2,100 in the Senate bill. So the Senate bill helps older Americans much more than the House bill did, though I think the CBO estimate was not quite fair towards the House bill. And as you see in over 1,000 counties now, you can't get individual plans under the current Obamacare. So it's a fictional number, really, quite frankly, for older Americans in the ACA, and they're not giving the necessary premium credit I think the AHCA deserves. It's safe to say the Senate is far more generous and eliminates this risk for older Americans and will keep their premiums under control. So I think that the Senate bill really does achieve that. So on net, I think it's a good bill. It's a bill personally I would vote for, even though I would have liked to see more flexibility on states. I think any Republican who ran on repealing Obamacare, the burden is on them to get to yes. And keep this campaign promise. There are currently 4 Republicans on the conservative side who say they oppose it. Rand Paul, Ted Cruz, Mike Lee, and Ron Johnson. I think at the end of the day, if you read their statements, they want to find a way to yes. I don't know if you can get Paul. I definitely think you can get Johnson and Cruz. I'm not sure about Lee. But then you also have to worry about Susan Collins in the center. It does, though, look like other centrists like Bill Cassidy, Shelley Moore Caputo. I think you can get to yes. And then I imagine McConnell's going to have some breathing room to try and find ways to negotiate senators on. For instance, there's not much money allocated for the opioid crisis, but you could very easily in the amendment process have a Portman or a Caputo put up a couple $2 billion for opioids. Everyone puts it in, and then Portman and all of the Appalachian states have something to show their citizens that they've done. So I'd say passage is still 50-50. I'd like to see them find some way to try and get catastrophic plans in there, try to give states more flexibility. But on the whole, I do think that this meets the litmus test and is much better than the status quo, and Republicans should get behind it. The other 2 quick things I just want to mention. One, you're starting to see some internal friction amongst the Democrats after the loss of the special election about Nancy Pelosi. She really figured quite prominently by the Republicans in the House race. You may argue they ran against her. I would be shocked if she was ousted. She's raised a ton of money. She's a very competent whipper of votes. And she, quite frankly, whether you like her or dislike her, achieved quite a bit of the Democrats' agenda for President Obama. So I think even if she were to be replaced by someone else, Republicans would try and point out how out of touch they are with mainstream Americans, just like they have effectively with Pelosi. But at the end of the day, I expect her to continue to be the House Minority Leader. Finally, something to watch for on Monday. Monday is, I think, the last day scheduled in the Supreme Court's term. That is typically the day that members of the Supreme Court announce their retirement. There's been a lot of speculation that either Anthony Kennedy, the swing vote, or Clarence Thomas may announce their retirement. If Kennedy were to leave, that would be earth-shattering, as you could put on a 5th conservative and perhaps make a big change to Roe v. Wade. If it's Thomas, it wouldn't change the ideological balance of the court, but you could replace him with someone younger. We'll see whether or not any of those rumors come to fruition. Let's be honest, no one other than those 2 men know what their plans are. But it's something worth keeping an eye on, and if President Trump has a chance to put a 2nd member of the Supreme Court on this year, it really will allow him to shape his legacy through the court. So that's something to watch. So that's it for me. Thanks so much, and we'll talk to you soon.